It seems like ever since AMD kicked off this new wave or generation of products for the desktop consumer space, starting with the release of Zen 4, they just can't seem to catch a break with all of the negative press. Then adding on to that, their Radeon division seems to be in a world full of trouble. Let's discuss that in this video. Hey, if you enjoy content like this, drop a like, make sure to subscribe, and smash that bell so you never miss another video. Hey, what is going on guys? Danny here, welcome back to the channel and I hope you've all been doing well. Over these past few months, we've seen a lot of new PC hardware get introduced to the market. AMD has been one of the companies that has been at the forefront of all of this, where they've released new CPUs and GPUs. As with all new hardware releases, there's generally a lot of hype surrounding them, especially around launch, but what I think is more important to look at is how things turn out after the release. Kicking things off was Zen 4, which was released last year in August, and when it hit the market, while reception was okay, it didn't end up really selling all that well because of the high costs associated with the new AM5 platform. So a lot of people just weren't enticed if it wasn't that big of an improvement over the previous gen, and when they could just throw in a 5800X3D into their existing AM4 system, which is basically the same level of performance, it just didn't make a lot of sense. They did recently mitigate this though by releasing new non-X CPUs at significantly lower prices compared to their X variants, and the reviews for these parts was overall positive. Not only did these non-X parts deliver like 90% of the performance as the X SKUs, they ran significantly cooler and consumed a lot less power, which should tell you just how hard AMD pushed Zen 4 out of the gate. Along with that, if you wanted the higher performance, all you have to do is just go into the BIOS, enable PBO or Precision Boost Overdrive, which is their auto overclocking algorithm, and it'll give you the same sort of performance as the X parts, but without having to pay for the X letter premium. So I'll give them credit for that. If you're in the market for a new build and want to go AMD, then these CPUs are a good choice. The other thing I've noticed recently is that DDR5 pricing compared to where it was when Zen 4 launched back in August has come down quite significantly. A DDR5 6000 kit that reviewers were using for the reviews were like $200 or $250 back when Zen 4 was released, and now you can find them for about $140 to $150, so that's also a steep drop. Memory pricing is something that's out of their control, so I'm not really going to zonk them for that. However, motherboard prices are still ridiculous. Boards which are considered entry level are starting at like $200 US. That is just absurd if you ask me. But according to Lisa Su, she recently stated at CES 2023 that there will be new entry-level boards at lower prices, so we'll see how those turn out. I'm wondering just how stripped down they'll be, what kind of features they'll be missing, how they'll handle overclocking, etc. I mean, it's great that we have cheap, fast 6-core parts like the Ryzen 5 7600, but I mean, if the motherboards cost as much as $200 plus, then hardly anyone in that segment is going to buy this chip. You're better off buying an i5 13400F or 13500 with a B660 motherboard and some DDR4 RAM. They really need to figure this motherboard situation out, otherwise for mainstream and budget builds, Intel is going to dominate them. Recently there were reports of a new Agiza microcode update that disabled cores on 6-core Ryzen 5 7600X CPUs. I definitely don't think it's appropriate to have these sort of major bugs with the BIOS when you're charging a premium for the motherboards. Until they figure this motherboard situation out, I don't really see sales for Zen 4 improving. One of the other things they talked about at CES 2023 was their X3D CPUs. I've recently made a video about those CPUs expressing my doubts. The benchmarks that AMD showed off were questionable, and I don't think the CPUs will meet the performance claims. I'll have a link to it in the description. Shifting our focus away from their CPU division, I wanted to talk about the Radeon Technologies group, as I think right now they're in a situation that's far worse. Once the RX 7000 series were reviewed, it became painfully obvious that AMD straight up lied in their presentation, and the claims they made were just BS, making it seem like the RX 7900 XTX would offer performance that was like 50 to 70% faster than the 6950 XT, when in actuality, the reviewers showed it to be about 35 to 40% faster on average. In fact, even in AMD's own review guide, they had it positioned as much slower. Along with that, there's been issues with VR performance. In some cases, these new GPUs perform much worse than their last gen flagship part. So right out of the gate, they were already off to a rough start. Right now, it seems like the two big issues ongoing are with their reference RX 7000 series models, which are made by AMD, and also drivers which seem to be affecting last-gen RX 6000 graphics cards, going as far as killing them and even cracking dies, which is definitely not good. Starting off with the former, this topic was thoroughly investigated by Der Bauer. I'll have a link to that video in the description as well. It's definitely worth checking out. I did make a video discussing this topic late last month when it was originally reported on the Hardware Lex forum, forums, but there's been a lot that's happened since the initial investigation on the subject. In his investigation, he found that the reference RX 7900 XTX graphics cards, which were sent over to him by his viewers, had this problem where when the card was vertically mounted, there was a minimal delta between the GPU core temp and the hotspot temp, but when he horizontally mounted them with just the common orientation most people have their graphics cards installed, the delta was really high. The cause of this, which is confirmed by AMD, is that there's not enough fluid in the vapor chamber. Due to the high junction temperatures, this would cause the GPU to exhibit thermal throttling behavior, even though it shouldn't since the rest of the GPU's temps were fine. But due to that, you're going to be losing performance. Now, Gordon over at PC World did an interview with Scott Herkelman, who's one of the leading managers at Radeon at CES 2023, and he basically downplayed the whole situation by stating it was a minor issue, only a small batch were affected, and that they're going to be RMAing the GPUs for users who are affected, even though that doesn't seem like it's the case. You can definitely appreciate that he addressed questions publicly, but if the actions by his company don't reflect what he was saying, then that's obviously a problem. Initially, when this problem surfaced, there were numerous users who were trying to exchange and RMA their cards, but AMD support was denying the return, stating that the behavior was perfectly normal and that they were working as intended, which is just unacceptable. I think they have changed their tone on this, where now they are accepting reviews without really any sort of hassle, but it's not a good look nonetheless. When Nvidia had the whole issue with the 12VH PWR adapters melting and burning, they were working with their partners to replace cards. I don't think I had heard or read anywhere that a user who was affected by the problem had a hassle dealing with Nvidia's RMA process. And the thing is, you can argue that that whole situation with Nvidia was user error or not, but regardless, at least they were helping users out instead of outright just denying them and claiming it was normal. With AMD, on the other hand, this is a manufacturer defect. They bear full responsibility for that, so they should not have been making the RMA process so troublesome. Scott also downplayed the issue by stating that it didn't really have any major impacts on performance, but Der Bauer had actually left a comment on their video stating that 3 out of the 4 cards he tested saw a performance loss of around 10 to 20% with the fan spinning at 100%. That's definitely not a small performance delta. You're not getting the performance that you paid for, it's as simple as that. The other thing that was downplayed was the number of cards affected. Saying that there's a small batch makes it seem like it's not very widespread, but you can go online to various tech forums, the AMD subreddit, YouTube, and find lots of comments of people complaining about this problem. Der Bauer in that same comment mentioned how ComputerBase, who are another large tech outlet in the German hardware community, ran a poll and found that 20% of their users were affected in their user base alone. If there was a way to find stats for affected users worldwide, then I have a feeling that calling it a small batch would be an understatement. Lastly, Scott mentioned that if you're affected, we have a replacement for you, whereas Der Bauer and recently Igor's Labs have mentioned that they aren't able to get replacements for their cards simply because AMD don't have stock available. And I do recall that there were users on the AMD subreddit mentioning this message as well, where they were receiving emails stating the same. Igor posted the email he got back from the AMD support team stating the following: "We understand that you want a replacement for your RX 7900 XTX. It is important to know that at the moment we are not able to replace your card as we do not have stock available in our warehouses. We can start the process as soon as the inventory is replenished, but right now we don't have an estimated date for replenishment. If you prefer a refund, we can process that refund immediately, and we will provide you with a return label so you can send the card back to our warehouse." So at this point, they don't have enough supply to replace all the cards from users who are affected by this issue, so I think they should just offer the users refunds at this point, which it looks like they are, and that's a good thing. They can't replace them right away, they don't have an ETA as to when they'll be getting stock, so you don't want to leave your users in limbo like that. It could be days, weeks, or even months, but the consumers shouldn't have to put up with that, as it's not their mistake, it's not their responsibility. They really shouldn't have to jump through all these hoops to get a working card, especially one as expensive as this. If I was someone who was in this position and ended up getting a refund, honestly, I would just get an RTX 4080 and call it a day. You'll get a working card with better support, although that depends on who you buy that model from, but at least you won't have to deal with AMD's bad drivers. Speaking of drivers, let's talk about our next topic. This comes from krisfix-germany. I'll have a link to his channel down below. His channel seems to be focused on GPU repair videos. They're actually quite interesting, as he does a full-on teardown of the graphics cards, shows the whole repair process. I think it's pretty neat. Anyways, he recently posted a video where he mentions that 48 out of the 60 graphics cards which were sent to his repair service had a defect that rendered them unrepairable. He mentioned that the common denominator amongst all these users was the driver. Now, he does also mention in this video that more information is needed, and there's no concrete evidence here to suggest that the driver is what's actually causing the problem. As far as I know, AMD haven't made any statements publicly regarding the matter. I'd imagine they'd have at least reached out to krisfix to get some info. He hypothesized that perhaps with the most recent driver, AMD was trying to push the cards a little bit too hard, and some of the samples just couldn't handle it. He did also mention how the affected samples all had the defects occur in the same areas, which is intriguing. Chris did also follow up his video with a post on his Facebook page with a photo of the cracked die. Really bizarre stuff. It's hard to imagine a driver is what's causing this problem, but I don't know for sure. It's things like these that make AMD sometimes difficult to recommend. You have someone who might be asking you advice for a build, and their top priority is stability and good support, so you're going to lean towards Nvidia as they just don't have these weird software problems. AMD makes great hardware, but they're severely lacking when it comes to driver optimization and support. Fine wine is just a lazy excuse to have buggy launch drivers. It's just copium. And what's funny is that they've had a long history and reputation for having shoddy drivers. Every generation we hope that they'll deliver an experience that's on par with their competitors, and they just don't because of how much they're being held back in the software department. You cannot position yourself as some market leader, price your products as much as them, and pretend like you're dominating in market share with problems like these. With their behavior in the market, it just seems like they don't care, and I think this will be really detrimental for their future. If you guys found this video to be informative and entertaining, then leave a like. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Be sure to check out the video description for cool links and ways to support the channel, such as using my Amazon affiliate link. And if you're interested in seeing more content like this, then consider subscribing. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.